13 spine-chilling true stories of best friends, exposed secrets that haunted us forever. The fire crackled loudly against the chill of the night, its dancing light fighting to stave off the darkness that crept ever closer around the abandoned Fernwood Summer Camp. Mike, Rachel, David, and Sarah, 4 friends bound by years of laughter, sat huddled around the flames, but a lingering unease stirred between them. Their long-awaited retreat quickly morphed from a nostalgic reunion into something sinister. Secrets began to unravel, revealing old wounds and unforeseen betrayals that haunted them like shadows. Rachel's heart raced, the warmth from the fire failed to insulate her from the bone-chilling memories flooding back. "Remember when we first discovered that old treehouse?" She forced a laugh, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. It hung heavy in the air, as if the forest itself listened, ready to swallow them whole. They reminisced about childhood adventures under the wide blue sky, yet each fond memory turned ghostly as unspoken accusations lingered between them, wrapping them in an icy grip. "Do you remember what happened with Tommy?" David's eyes darted apprehensively, reflecting the flickering flames. "I heard you two had a thing?" Suddenly, the air thickened. Tension wrapped around them like a noose, squeezing out laughter and replacing it with fearful glances. The fun had turned sour, like old milk left to ferment in the heat. Mike fumbled, eager to regain control, but the shadows creeping around them felt more real than the warmth of their shared memories. "Stay calm, we're together, right?" Mike murmured, a hollow conviction in his own voice. But the truth hung like a storm cloud, and Rachel's secret gnawed at her insides. She'd stolen more than one of their hearts as teenagers. She had betrayed a friend. Was it time to confess? A spectacular flash of lightning rumbled overhead, a sign of worse things to come. The camp had a sinister reputation, and as David started recounting the old tales about lost souls exacting revenge, each crackle of the fire seemed to echo these dark legends. They whispered of children who vanished, their spirits haunting any semblance of friendship that dared to falter. Then, out of nowhere, an uncanny laugh echoed from the woods, a sound that twisted the joy of their reunion into a spiraling terror. Everyone froze. "Just a raccoon, right?" Sarah said, her voice quivering. They tried to laugh it off, but the chill creeping down their spines dismissed the comfort of shared camaraderie. The air turned electric, and paranoia seeped into their glances. "Something's out there," David stammered, practically leaping to his feet, the shadows playing ominously around him. Everyone looked towards the woods, every heart in sync with the beat of fear. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The night deepened, each moment heavy with unspoken dread. Eyes wide with fear, Mike tried to appear composed, yet his insides twisted in knots. "We can't let this get the best of us, right?" But trust had begun to erode, fear blossoming into accusations, each friend a suspect cloaked in darkness. Rachel's guilt weighed down her heart, crazed whispers of betrayal growing louder as shapes loomed on the periphery of their fire's light. And then, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, reverberating through the treetops. One friend was gone. In the suffocating darkness, they realized they were hunted, and in the garden of memories, dread bloomed where trust had once flourished. Even worse, the real danger might just be the secrets they had buried not just in their hearts, but in the very fabric of their friendship. As terror consumed them, they knew they must confront the truth, or become the echoes of those who never returned. The chill of the night just became unbearable. Mike stood frozen, panic etched across his face. "What happened?" he shouted into the darkness, hoping for an answer that wouldn't come. The scream still echoed in his ears, mingling with the sounds of the rustling leaves. He turned slowly, searching the shadows for any sign of Sarah. Rachel clutched David's arm, her nails digging into his flesh. They stared at the dark woods, their breaths quickening, eyes wide with dread. "We have to find her," David yelled, pushing through the knot of tension that had formed between them. "Are you crazy? It's too dangerous," Mike shot back, trying to yank them back towards the fire. But the fire felt feeble, its light fading like their sense of safety. "What if she's hurt?" Rachel's voice broke, a raw edge to her plea. They were friends, bound together by history and now, possibly, guilt. Just mere hours ago, they shared laughter and memories. Now, those moments felt like knives. Suddenly, the crackling of leaves grew louder. Footsteps, too deliberate to belong to a raccoon. Something was moving in the bushes. "Did you hear that?" Mike whispered, his eyes straining to see past the flames. "Yeah, and it doesn't sound like Sarah," David whispered back, his voice shaky. The shadows shifted, and then there it was, a shadow in the trees, a figure, but it was too dark to make out any details. Mike's heart raced as he drew closer to the fire, seeking any form of warmth that could chase away the fears gnawing at his gut. "Stop!" Rachel shouted, her voice trembling. "What if it's her? What if it isn't?" David shot back. The tension between them grew, a rift that felt impossible to mend. They were scared, and fear brought out the worst in them. Then they heard it, the sound of laughter again, lighter this time, echoing through the trees. It was taunting. "That's Sarah!" Rachel cried out, hope piercing through the panic. But it sounded wrong, hollow like the laughter of a child in a nightmare. "Let us go, we have to check," Mike said, moving toward the sound, heart pounding. Before anyone could argue, he stepped into the void of the trees, leaving the flickering light behind. With every step, the laughter warped, shifting into something malevolent that raised goosebumps on Rachel's arms. David hesitated. "What about the fire?" He called after Mike, but he was already lost in the shadows. The darkness swallowed him whole, sparking a fight-or-flight instinct in the others. Rachel gripped David's arm tightly. "Maybe we should stay here, it's too dangerous." But the laughter continued, seemingly coming from all directions now. "You don't know what you're doing." Rachel's voice trembled with the edge of hysteria. "We can't let him go alone," David insisted, finally giving in to the rising terror. Together, they stepped into the forest, the branches clawing at their clothes like ghostly fingers. With each heartbeat, the forest seemed to grow darker, the air thick with a presence they couldn't see. All they could hear was their own breaths, quick and sharp, and the haunting laughter that grew louder and louder until it became a shriek slicing through the night air. "Mike!" they called, but the woods absorbed their voices. Then, a body stumbled into the clearing, a shadow that rushed from the darkness, amid gasps of horror. It wasn't Mike. It was Sarah, her face pale and eyes wide, wild as if she had seen a ghost. "What happened? Where's Mike?" Rachel demanded, dread flooding her consciousness. But Sarah only pointed back into the woods, her voice trembling. "He wasn't alone, something's coming." The trees seemed to tremble as the woods withheld their secrets, and the laughter resumed, growing louder. The shadows moved, advancing on them, and the horror lurking within the Fernwood Summer Camp waited, eager to reclaim its lost souls. What had Mike stumbled into? Did he uncover a truth that would bind them all? Or was he just another echo in the darkness? The air thickened, suffocating them as Sarah's words hung heavily in the night. Rachel and David exchanged frantic glances, fear etched across their faces. The laughter still echoed, not sweet, but cruel, slashing through the night like barbed wire. "Something's coming," Sarah echoed, her eyes darting back toward the woods, body shaking. Her breath quickened as the shadows danced around them. "What do you mean? What did you see?" Rachel pressed, her voice sharper, more urgent. She wanted details, reassurance, something other than the chilling uncertainty wrapped around them. But Sarah shook her head, biting her lip, unable to form words. Instead, she simply stared into the darkness, and as they followed her gaze, an unsettling sensation prickled at the back of David's neck. "Should we go back to the fire?" David asked, glancing the way they had come. "We need to stick together." "Not without Mike." Rachel's resolve kicked in, a fierce flame against the chill. She stepped away from the clearing, eyes locked on the forest. "He's out there, we can't leave him." "No, Rachel!" David shouted, gripping her arm. "We don't know what's out there. It's not safe." But she pulled away, determination on her face. "He's my friend. I won't abandon him." And with that, she launched herself into the darkness, stepping deeper into the woods. David cursed under his breath and followed, Sarah on their heels, leaving the flickering fire behind, its warmth a distant memory. Each rustle of leaves filled them with dread, shadows sprinting just out of sight. "We have to move fast," David whispered, shushing Rachel's frantic breaths. They plunged into the oppressive foliage, ducking branches that clawed at their clothes and skin. The air felt electric, charged with something unseen and sinister. Another shriek pierced the night, this one filled with anguish. It was Mike. They all froze, breath caught in their throats. It was a sound that could shatter glass, raw and terrified. "Mike!" Rachel cried, voice cracking. They darted toward the sound, hearts pounding in sync with the rustling leaves, each step another beat closer to terror. "Over here!" came a distant shout. It was Mike! Relief flooded over Rachel briefly. But the tone of his voice, it was frantic, layered with something deeper. Something dark. "Stay close," David ordered, weaving through the underbrush, panic igniting their steps as they pushed on. But the laughter returned, twisting, wrapping around them like a vine. It was different this time, more menacing, like a switch had flipped within the woods. Suddenly, a flash caught Rachel's eye, a figure darting behind the trees, shadow flitting just out of sight. She pointed. "Did you see that?" "What?" David spun, focus shifting toward the movement, but the figure slipped away. A chilling laugh echoed again, closer, and then stopped. They stood breathless, clutching each other, grasping for sanity amongst the chaos. "Mike?" David called, voice tremoring in the still air. The woods answered with silence, an unsettling, devouring silence. They pressed on, hearts racing, until they reached a clearing. It was vast and dark, the moonlight unable to penetrate the thick canopy. A hollow pit opened in Rachel's stomach as shadows shifted, merging and expanding. "Mike!" Rachel shouted again, fear clawing at her throat. She felt lost, cut off from the world they knew. The forest breathed, alive, watching. Then they saw him. A figure emerged from the darkness, stumbling, arms outstretched. But it wasn't just Mike. He was not alone. Behind him loomed something else, a tall silhouette, veiled in an aura of dread. Its eyes were like black holes, absorbing all hope. They stood frozen, hearts hammering in their chests, the fear closing in as realization dawned on them this was not a rescue. "Run!" Mike screamed, but it was too late. The shadows shuddered, roared, and suddenly all hell broke loose as darkness surged forward. What had consumed Mike? Was it the laughter of the woods, or something more sinister, an ancient presence awakened? And how far would they have to run before the darkness finally claimed them all? The shadows erupted around them, swirling like a black tempest. David's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Rachel's hand, pulling her backward, desperate for a way out. The screams seemed to echo everywhere, ricocheting off the trees, mocking them. "Run!" he shouted again, this time with urgency, adrenaline pumping through his veins. They stumbled back the way they had come. But which way was safe? Panic surged along with their rapid breaths, and the laughter taunted them from behind. But Mike! Where was Mike? The thought clawed at Rachel as she stumbled, nearly losing her footing in the thick underbrush. "What about Mike?" she cried, her voice cracking. "We can't leave him." "Rachel!" David yelled. He's not the same. We need to get out of here." Another roar fractured the air, primal and chilling. The darkness seethed, pulsating with unearthly malevolence, energy pushing against their chests like a physical force. Shadows lunged toward them, gnashing with unseen teeth. "Go!" David urged, his grip tightening. "We're not leaving each other behind." With a swift turn, Rachel's heart twisted, torn between loyalty and terror. She caught a glimpse of Mike, or what was left of him. His face was twisted in fear, but his eyes were empty, washed over by an unholy glaze. No! She gasped, and for a frantic heartbeat she hesitated, pulled back by the ghost of her friendship. Please! Rachel! Mike screamed, his voice laced with an unnatural tremor, almost unrecognizable. David steered her forward. We can't help him. We don't even know what he is anymore. The pain in his voice struck her, but they were already being pulled deeper into the woods, the laughter closing in like a predator. Branches whipped against their skin, tearing into their clothes as they struggled to run. The laughter warped into something chaotic, slithering under their skin. It seeped into their thoughts, taunting them with images of horrors yet unseen. Suddenly, the ground beneath Rachel gave way. She yelped, twisting to grasp at David, but it was too late. She stumbled into a deep thicket, her leg twisting painfully as the roots snagged her. Rachel! David cried, turning back. He rushed to her side, but the darkness coiled closer, the shadows thickening, nearly mocking their plight. Leave me! Just go! She shouted, fear battling the instinct to fight. No! He insisted, crouching to lift her. I'm not leaving you! Hold on! With brute force, David yanked her free, gripping her tightly as they fought to their feet. The shadows twitched, retreating briefly, as if biding their time. But then, just as the threat seemed to waver, a burst of laughter erupted right in front of them, a monstrous ripple through the forest air. It was Mike again. Run! He roared again, this time with a haunting urgency. The shadows surged forward once more, and with it came something even darker, an entity materializing from the depths, an eyes-bleeding visage that chilled their very souls. The air thickened, compressing like a vice, and Rachel's throat ran dry, terror silencing any thought. Get back! David shouted, shoving Rachel behind him. Shadows whipped around them, circling closer, relentless. Can't stay! Rachel gasped, trying to pry David's grip off her arm. We need to find another way out. But the laughter intensified, echoing within the trees, and the shape loomed larger, feeding off the growing fear. The tension hung like an impending storm, heavy and chaotic. They couldn't escape. Make a choice! Mike screamed, infusing despair into his voice, the darkness almost swallowing him whole. What choice? Rachel shouted, despair spilling over as she looked at her friend and the being behind him. The creature surged forward, a wave of shadows, and all at once, a piercing silence fell. It was as if everything held its breath, time hanging by a thread, waiting for them to break. Now! David yelled, and they dashed, sprinting into the unknown, racing against something they couldn't comprehend. But was the end near, or merely the beginning? The ground trembled as the entity chased after them, unfurling. In a dance of shadows, determined to reclaim what it sought. What price would they pay for survival? And would they escape the depths of darkness, or be consumed by it forever? The forest closed in around them, tangled roots and limbs clawing at their legs. Every heartbeat reverberated with dread. David's mind raced, battling the dark fog that threatened to consume him. The shriek of the entity filled the air, reverberating in his skull like an echo of doom. They were running blindly, each step fueled by desperation. Left! Rachel yelled suddenly, pivoting toward a narrow gap between two towering trees. David followed, not daring to question her instincts, his heart pounding like a war drum. The shadows shifted, swirling ominously, dark tendrils reaching out as they squeezed through the space. They burst into a small clearing, but the respite was short-lived. The air felt thicker here, suffocating. The sunlight that peeked through the treetops was swallowed by heavy, black clouds that rolled ominously overhead. It was unnatural. Nothing in nature turned the sky that color. Where's the way out? Rachel gasped, her voice laced with panic. She frantically scanned the perimeter, but the trees loomed like sentinels, their trunks twisted and gnarled, blocking any sign of escape. David gritted his teeth. I don't know. Before he could finish, a guttural laughter crept into the clearing, wrapping around them like a sinister embrace. It resonated from all directions, chilling David's spine. They could hear Mike's voice interspersed in that cruel cacophony, pleading and mocking all at once. "Help me! I'm still here!" "Shut up!" Rachel shouted, clenching her fists. He's not Mike anymore." David's stomach churned at her words. The idea gnawed at him. Could Mike be saved? "Maybe we can bring him back," he stammered, but Rachel shook her head fiercely. "No. He's gone, David. We have to keep moving." As if reacting to their doubt, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The trees around them leaned inward, branches creaking, almost as if they were listening. With a sudden insight, David remembered something. The old cabin. "It's not far from here." He pointed into the darkness. "If we can reach it," Rachel grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "That place is a death trap." "Better than standing here," he urged, desperation leaking into his tone. The laughter morphed into a deranged echo, a promise of suffering. "Fine. Let us go." They took off, racing through the underbrush, branches snagging their clothes and skin. With every step, the laughter morphed, slipping into dark shrieks. As they broke through the thicket, the outline of the cabin materialized through the trees, its windows dark like vacant eyes. David and Rachel skidded to a halt. The air felt heavier here, charged with a malignant energy. "What if it's worse inside?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "Better than facing whatever is out here," David insisted. They edged toward the door, hearts hammering in unison. David pushed it open, the rusted hinges creaking ominously. Inside, darkness welcomed them like an old friend. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that broke through boarded windows. The silence was suffocating. "Is this it?" Rachel's voice echoed, small and afraid. Then the laughter burst back, ringing like church bells, reverberating off the cabin walls. It came from below. "Where is that coming from?" Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper, her breath hitching. David raised a shaky finger to his lips, gesturing for silence. They stood, berated by the echoes of memories, unsure of the next choice. A sound scuttled from beneath the floorboards, scratching, and then something thudded, demanding attention from the dark beneath. "What is down there?" Rachel breathed, her eyes wide. David felt a chilling sense of dread wash over him. The laughter shifted into something deeper, something more sinister. "I don't want to find out," he admitted, backing toward the door. But it was too late. A shadow shot out from the floor, lunging toward them. "Run!" David screamed, adrenaline flooding his veins as they sprinted for the door. But would they be able to escape the horrors hiding in the dark? The shadows surged behind them, and as they burst into the night air, the question remained: was there truly any place safe anymore? They stumbled into the night, breathless, the sound of their ragged gasps swallowed by the oppressive darkness surrounding them. David glanced over his shoulder, the cabin now a silhouette against the swirling shadows. The laughter persisted, echoing through the trees, a cruel reminder of the terror they had just escaped but not vanquished. "Where do we go?" Rachel's voice shook, a thin reed in the howling wind. Her eyes darted nervously from tree to tree, as if they might come alive again. "Back the way we came," David shouted, though doubt gnawed at him. He led them deeper into the woods, heart racing. Each snap of a twig, each rustle in the underbrush sent jolts of fear coursing through him. The darkness felt alive, pulsing with malevolence. "David, we can't," Rachel panted, gripping his arm painfully. "The forest, it's changed. I can almost feel it watching us." A chill settled in his bones. "Then we find another way," he urged, pushing his way through the twisted branches that seemed to reach for them. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, but the thundering laughter roiled in the air behind them, close enough now to feel like nails against their skin. They pushed through the trees until they reached a narrow stream, its murmuring a stark contrast to the malevolent laughter still haunting them. "We could follow it," Rachel suggested, her voice trembling. "Maybe it leads to a road." A sudden splash echoed as something broke the surface, a bony hand shooting up from the water, fingers twitching as if grasping for the air. David yelped and pulled Rachel back just as the hand vanished. That's not possible. Rachel gasped, eyes wide with shock. We need to go back, she pleaded, tears brimming. We can't. His words tumbled out in desperation. We have to keep moving. He scanned the surroundings, looking for any sign of safety. The trees loomed like guardians to some dark secret, and the laughter morphed into a twisted melody, wrapping around them, whispering sinister things about the life they knew and the fate that awaited them. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind. David's heart stopped. They're coming! He shouted, dragging Rachel down the bank, their feet slipping on the muddy ground. They plunged into the stream, cold water shocking their system, the laughter growing louder, closer. The darkness closed in, wrapping around them, alive and malicious. David splashed through, desperation fueling his strength as Rachel stumbled beside him, struggling against the current. The laughter turned to screams, morphing into a familiar voice. Help me! It was Mike, floating just beneath the surface, his face pale and eyes wide, filled with despair. David, we can't! Rachel cried, tugging on his sleeve, panic surging in her voice. He's not real. No! He might be alive! David shouted, reaching for the apparition. But just as their fingertips brushed, Mike's face twisted into a wicked grin, eyes glimmering with a darkness that chilled David to the core. Let him drown. It sang tauntingly. You think you can save him? Sickened, David recoiled. Rachel was tugging him away, pulling him back toward the trees. We have to go now. But with every step they took, shadows shifted around them, whispering secrets only they could hear. David felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. What if it's too late for us? He whispered, fear rooting him to the spot. I'd rather face whatever it is out here than let it take us. Rachel shouted over the roaring laughter, dragging him forward. Just then, a deafening crack split the air. A towering oak fell nearby, the explosion of wood echoing through the woods. David jumped back, and in that moment, they felt that the ground beneath them gave way. They tumbled into the dark abyss, screaming, and the shadows swallowed their cries. Everything went black. What awaited them below? Would they find the truths hidden in the depths, or was it a dead end, a final trap? As the darkness closed in, one sinister question loomed. Would they escape, or become another whisper in the haunted woods? They landed hard on the cold, damp earth, the shock reverberating through their bodies. David gasped, the air knocked from his lungs. Rachel landed beside him, dazed but already pushing herself up. They lay in a small cavern, the ceiling impossibly high but draped in ominous darkness. A faint glimmer of light filtered through cracks in the rock above, but it did little to banish the shadows lurking like predators. David, where are we? Rachel's whisper was barely audible, but he could hear the tremor in her voice. I don't know, he breathed, trying to calm the frantic beating of his heart. We need to find a way out. They stood, clinging together as they peered into the cavern. The air was thick and stale, like death nestled in the very ground. There's gotta be an exit somewhere, David muttered, scanning the uneven walls. As they ventured deeper, their footsteps echoed unnaturally, and the laughter began again, echoing off the stone. It twisted through the air, a cacophony of insanity, warping into familiar voices that sent shivers down their spines. David froze, dread spilling into his veins. Look! Rachel pointed through the darkness, skin pale, as if the shadows themselves drained the color from her. A stone archway jutted out ahead, partially concealed by the entanglement of roots and vines. Let us check it out, David said, voice steadier than he felt. As they approached, the laughter shifted into a low whisper, repeating words they dreaded. You shouldn't have chosen to run. You will pay. Come no! Shut up! Rachel screamed, her voice mingling with the manic laughter, bouncing back and forth until it filled the cavern, overwhelming them. She stumbled back, hands covering her ears. Rachel! We can't lose our heads now. David pulled her closer, squeezing her arm. The urge to flee was overwhelming, but the whispering shadows seemed to draw them in. Look, Rachel said, her tone shifting as she turned back to the archway. What if it's a way out, or something worse? Only one way to find out, David replied, determination gripping him. They exchanged a quick look, the fear in Rachel's eyes hardening into resolve. As they stepped through the arch, a sudden chill enveloped them, unlike any cold they had felt before. The laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken horrors. They entered a narrow passage, walls slick with moisture, so dark they could feel the shadows pressing in around them. With every step, the ground pulsed beneath them, almost alive. David reached into his pocket, fumbling for his phone. The faint glow flickered to life, illuminating their surroundings just enough to see. When they noticed the markings on the wall's symbols painted in a dark, sticky substance that left a trail of dread in their minds. "What is that? Blood?" Rachel gasped, taking a step back. "Or something else," David whispered, his throat dry. "We need to keep moving." The passage curved sharply, leading them into an expansive room that radiated despair. In the center, a stone altar loomed, stained and marred by years of dark rituals. Horrific images flickered through David's mind, sacrifices, lost souls, each one a stark reminder of their situation. He felt his stomach twist. "Do you see that?" Rachel pointed, her voice quivering. A rusted iron gate loomed behind the altar. But just as hope sparked, they both heard it again, soft laughter creeping from the shadows around them, stirring the air with a sinister energy. "Come play with us forever," a voice whispered, deep and melodic. David shoved Rachel back, retreating toward the exit they had come through. "No! We have to go!" he yelled, but it was already too late. The gate began to rattle, the dry creaking of rusted metal drowning out their breaths. Shadows swelled and shrank, twisting unnaturally to take form. A figure emerged, a childlike shape, eyes glowing like coals in the suffocating darkness. Join us," it chanted. David's heart raced, survival instincts igniting anew. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Rachel's hand and pulling her toward the archway. As the surroundings closed in on them, would they escape the clutches of whatever dark force had buried itself in these woods? Or would they succumb, becoming part of the whispers that haunted the caverns forever? The unfurling darkness behind them seemed to breathe, waiting for their next move. They bolted backward, hearts pounding, as the chilling laughter chased them like a predator. The shadows twisted, stretching impossibly, grasping at their heels. David felt a cold rush of air swirl around him, as if the darkness itself were alive, hungry for their fear. "Faster!" he barked, tugging Rachel's arm, pulling her through the archway. They stumbled into the passage, still slick with the dampness that seemed to seep into their bones. It was darker here, the phone's light barely slicing through the thickening shadows. They could hear it behind them, the wheezing, shrill laughter growing closer, almost mocking. David dared to glance over his shoulder. The childlike figure was gone, but he felt its presence lingering, watching, waiting. Beside him, Rachel shivered, her breath coming in short gasps. "Keep moving," he urged. They pressed on, the symbols on the walls growing more grotesque, more alive. It was as if they pulsed in time with their racing hearts, warning them of something sinister lurking just beyond the reach of their flickering light. Suddenly, the passage opened into a wider chamber. The air was thick here, suffocating, saturated with the smell of decay. Piles of bones littered the corners, remnants of those who hadn't escaped. Fear gripped David, sharp and icy. "David, we can't stay here!" Rachel cried, her eyes darting nervously. "There has to be another way. Look." He pointed toward the other side of the room. A narrow opening was barely visible at the far end, shrouded in shadows. "That could be our way out." They moved toward it slowly, the light flickering as if struggling to survive. But with every step, the laughter morphed into whispers, closer now, wrapping around them like a cold blanket. "Stay, play forever." Rachel's eyes were wide, filled with terror. "It's getting louder." "I know. Just keep going." David pressed on, his pulse quickening with every echo of the mocking voice. They reached the opening, and as David peered inside, his heart sank. It was another narrow passage, indistinguishable from the one they had just escaped. But then, through the haze of shadows and dread, he saw something that stopped him cold. A flickering torch swung from the ceiling ahead, illuminating silhouettes along the walls, figures huddled together, lifeless and still. Their faces were contorted in an endless scream, mouths open in muted horror, eyes wide and glassy. He staggered back, horror crashing over him. "David, what's wrong?" Rachel pressed against him, but he felt paralyzed, unable to break free from the sight. "We need to leave. Please." Those are people," he managed to whisper. "They didn't escape." Reality hit him like a punch. The figures weren't just remnants. They were souls, trapped in this nightmare. He could hear them now, faint cries mixing in with the laughter, blending into a tragic symphony of despair. "You will join us," they chanted, the echo reverberating against his skull. "Not if I can help it!" David shouted, pulling Rachel away from the horror, back toward the archway, but it was too late. The shadows surged around them, filling the chamber, wrapping them in icy fingers. "Run!" Rachel screamed, and they bolted back toward the entrance, the dark entities swirling in their wake, laughter morphing into something more sinister, more demanding. As they hurtled back into the passage, a sharp pain shot through David's shoulder. He stumbled, skinning his knee on the jagged stone as he fell. Panic surged within him as Rachel's terrified scream echoed in his ears. He looked up just in time to see shadows closing in. "David!" she cried, reaching out. He felt the darkness creeping in, cold and merciless, pulling him toward whatever haunted force lay beneath. Racing thoughts flooded his mind, but one question pulsed above all: would he lose her? Would he fall prey to the shadows? In a desperate attempt, David lunged forward, grabbing Rachel's hand firmly. "Don't let go!" As the shadows writhed around them, ready to tighten their grasp, David and Rachel made a final, frantic dash back toward the flickering light of the archway. They were almost there. But the laughter crescendoed one last time into a sinister wailing, drowning them in shadow as they crossed the threshold. They fell into darkness. What awaited them on the other side? Would escape even be possible, or was this their descent into madness? The darkness swallowed them whole, a heavy shroud that seemed to block out any hope of light or sound. David's heart raced, pounding against his ribcage like a caged animal desperate to escape. He felt Rachel's grip tightening, her fingers trembling against his palm. Then, suddenly, the world shifted. They landed on cold, uneven ground. It felt softer than stone, and as David slowly pushed himself up, he realized they were in some sort of cavern, illuminated by an eerie phosphorescence dripping from the damp ceiling. The light cast grotesque shadows, twisting around like whatever dark force had pursued them. "Where are we?" Rachel's voice was barely a whisper, trembling as if trying to fight back tears. David looked around, panic gnawing at him. The chamber was vast, but lined with jagged walls that seemed to pulse. The air stank of mold and something metallic. "I don't know, but we have to find a way out." "Look!" Rachel pointed. In a far corner, a set of ancient steps spiraled down into an even darker abyss. "We should check there." "No!" David snapped. "We don't know what's down there. We need to stay up here." He could still hear the echoes of that horrific laughter wrapping around them, invasive and mocking. But clearly, Rachel's mind was racing, caught between the need to escape and a deep-seated instinct to delve deeper into the mystery. "It might be a way out. What if it leads us to safety?" Before he could argue further, Rachel stepped toward the stairs. "You can't be serious," he said, feeling an icy grip around his heart. "I have to try. We can't stay here." She turned and began her descent, leaving David no choice but to follow, gripped by fear and an unshakable need to protect her. With each step, a chill slithered down David's spine. Shadows seemed to dance between the stone columns that lined the stairs, flickering like flashes of a forgotten memory. He could hear the whispers again, softer this time, but layered with something sinister. "Join us. Play with us, Rachel, hurry!" he urged. But she paused, turning back to him, a distant look in her eyes. "David, do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "It's calling to me." David felt his hair stand on end, a visceral warning sparking through him. No, don't listen. It's not real. It's just the darkness. Yet Rachel stepped closer to the edge of reason, a shimmering trance in her gaze. The whispers wrapped softly around her, seductive and warm, coaxing her into the depths of the unknown. No! Rachel! His voice pierced through the fog, yanking her back from its tendrils. She blinked, clarity returning as she stumbled back toward him, but he could see the fear dancing behind her eyes. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, the air grew heavier, almost suffocating. A vast chamber opened up, and they could see sparkling lights flickering like spirits trapped in crystal prisms. Is that gold? Rachel breathed, her eyes lighting up with wonder. What if it's treasure? David shook his head. No, this feels wrong. I can't shake this feeling. Then a low growl resonated through the cavern, echoing off the walls, cutting them off from logic and safety. The sparkling lights dimmed, and shadows slinked closer. They turned to see a figure emerge from the darker depths, a massive silhouette, grotesque and misshaped, its eyes glinting with malice. Play with us, it hissed, the laughter morphing into a hungry growl that swallowed their breaths. David and Rachel stumbled back, colliding with the cold, damp walls. The ancient treasures around them began to fade, transforming into twisted forms, as if all the darkness in the world had seeped into those once brilliant gems. What do we do? Rachel cried out, panic rising in her voice. Run! David yelled, but it was too late. The figure lunged, shattering the fragile illusion of treasure. Just as David turned to flee, a piercing scream echoed in the cavern. He glanced back. Another figure was there, Rachel, trapped in shadow. David! Help me! As he rushed forward, he felt the icy grip of fear tighten. Was he running toward rescue or doom? The darkness closed in around them as David reached for her. Would he pull her from the shadows, or would he be consumed alongside her? The answer hung heavy, threatening to pull them deeper into despair. What lurked in the depths behind the figure? Would they resist it, or was this their final game? The shadows descended like a tidal wave, crashing over David and Rachel as they stood helplessly inside the menacing cavern. David's heart raced, his mind spinning with desperate thoughts. He couldn't lose Rachel. He wouldn't let her slip away into the darkness. The figure loomed larger, its grotesque features contorting with malevolent glee. David! Rachel screamed, her voice a fragile thread fraying under pressure. Fear surged in David, igniting a fire within him. He couldn't allow hopelessness to take hold, not now. Hold on! He shouted, lunging forward through the thick, clammy air toward Rachel. Time slowed as he reached for her, but the shadows thickened, wrapping around him with chilling fingers that clutched at his limbs, pulling him back. Let go! David roared, gritting his teeth against the encroaching darkness. He mustered every ounce of strength, fighting against the unseen force holding him captive. Just when it seemed Rachel would be lost forever, he felt a surge of warmth and determination flood through him. We're not done here! With a desperate yank, he broke free of the shadows, rushing toward Rachel. He found her grasping at the edges of sanity, terror in her eyes. I won't leave you! He shouted, throwing his arms around her and pulling her close. The malevolent entity hissed as they began to retreat, its eyes burning with fury. You can't escape. Stay. Play. Forever. David and Rachel stumbled backward, their hearts hammering as they pressed against the cavern walls. The golden lights shifted to a deep crimson, the shadows thickening, swirling ominously as if alive and hungry. Why is it getting worse? Rachel gasped, her face pale. It feeds off of our fear. David shouted back, adrenaline coursing through him as he tightened his grip on her. We need to stop being afraid. We're stronger than this. Together, they turned to face the dark figure, which loomed in the center of the chamber, eyes glowing like embers, its laughter rising to a frenzy that rattled their bones. You will join us! It howled, reaching out with claw-like hands. Not today! David yelled, his voice slicing through the cacophony. He squared his shoulders, pushing against the instinct to flee, the moment swelling around him with urgency. We will not bend to you! Rachel's gaze flickered, and she took a step forward, meeting the entity's gaze. You don't own us. We're not your playthings. In response, a dark growl resonated from the entity, throwing the chamber into chaos. The darkness surged, pressing down on them as if trying to smother their light. But David and Rachel stood firm, locking their hands together tight. Together! They shouted in unison, a bond ignited by fierce determination. They pushed against the oppressive force, fighting back with unyielding courage. The shadows hesitated, recoiling, shaken by the united front. Let us out! Rachel cried, her voice a battle cry. The cavern shimmered around them, the darkness shrinking back, flickering like a candle caught in a storm. As if reacting to their combined will, the pathway to the outside world erupted with light, illuminating the shadows with a fierce radiance. The horrid laughter turned into a chorus of shrieks, echoing in panic. The darkness resisted, twisting and writhing, but gradually it began to unravel, losing its grip. Run! David seized Rachel's hand, their hearts pounding, feet pounding the ground as they sprinted toward the light flooding the cavern. The shadows screeched, shrinking further, defeated by the power of their determination. They lunged forward into the blinding glow, breaking free from the final clutches of the dark force. An explosion of light enveloped them, a potent warmth bathed their skin as they emerged back into the world outside, the forest alive with fresh air and tranquility. They collapsed together, breathless and shaken, the haunting echoes of the cavern slipping away into the wind. Around them, the trees stood tall and alive, and the once menacing shadows transformed into gentle forms swaying in the breeze. We did it, Rachel gasped, relief washing over her. We actually did it. David nodded, the weight of the night slowly lifting. Together, they shared a tentative smile, knowing that their bond had been forged stronger in the face of darkness. The woods seemed welcoming now, letting sunlight flood through the branches, illuminating their path home. Yet deep inside them lay a promise to face the shadows that lingered in the corners of their minds. They would not forget the darkness, but they wouldn't let it define them. And as they walked on, the laughter of the entity faded into mere whispers, shadows swirling behind them like forgotten memories. They were free. But freedom didn't mean an end. It was a fresh start, a promise to live, to cherish the light and guard against the darkness lurking in the corners of their pasts. As they stepped into the clearing, they both vowed through the laughter, the shadows, and the darkness that had felt so real, they would never lose sight of each other again. The camp had taught them many lessons, but the most important one of all remained clear: friendship bound by trust would always shine brighter than the shadows that tried to creep in. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, it really helps us. Flood the comments section with your reactions about this mind-blowing ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through those actions. Let us keep the stories coming.